Hello again, and Merry Christmas. And today we will explore a post that was just reposted on Facebook. And it's about 6 years old, I think, 5 or 6 years ago, that I created this and reposted it just recently. And I wanted to add a few things just as a matter of exercise, possibly adding some clouds, maybe actually eliminating some of the background mountains there so we have more room for the clouds, or maybe we expand the sky region. We'll see. A couple of things we want to do, especially adding some snowstorm. Right, with turbulence, some big snowflakes in the front, massive blizzard, almost like blurring it to the point where you don't recognize much of the mountains anymore. Maybe that's what we'll do. So let's get started. I will not try to find this picture from wherever I may have it in the past. I'll just right click and steal it. Hey, it's mine, I can do that. Copy this image and let's go to, where is my howler? Oh, let me find it. Okay, here it is. Let's see if we can paste it. Control V. Yep, it's still in the clipboard, so I can paste it right there. Or I can store it. And now I have a stored copy. If I click it, it will put it in, but it's not going to resample or, create a new image unless I ask for it right here. New document. It's not super big, but it has a better aspect ratio, a little bit nicer. All right, so let's see what we want to do here to turn it into an animation. Before we do that, let's isolate the sky region to then feed a different sky in there. Maybe something with nice clouds, maybe really just boring blue or gray or some sky fog or something like that. One thing we'll need is to identify this, so separate it. Right? So one thing I'll do is let's get some more room here. Zoom in a little bit. And what I'll do is, first of all, let's see, one approach is with the magic wand. There it is. And click in here or here. You can see it selects different regions, but it doesn't go very far off there because of the gradient. So we need a tolerance a little bit better here. And that's already better. This would be nice to combine. So let's do a shift click. There you go. Click here again, here, here, and gradually we'll add to that. Now some of the mountain is kind of disappearing here, but that's okay. We won't notice. But if you want it, because we won't notice once it's a snowstorm there, it'll be so blurry and foggy. But if you care about that, what you can do is zoom in here and perhaps not pick the entire mountain. Right, so you could possibly, let's store this first, just in case we want to keep that. Store this selection. And let's go and undo this up to about the point where the mountain was. There you go. So this mountain doesn't look too good here anyway. So one thing I'll do, I'll just use my magic, not the magic wand, but the lasso tool to select. And I'll move this a little bit to the side, something like this, and select this part here. And then just go along and you cut through where you don't want that sudden peak there. And maybe this one, let's go down here and kind of take a shortcut and basically eliminate part of the mountain, right? And then all the way here and use the shift key so it's an added selection. Right, so we now have the whole thing selected the way we want it. Maybe we can add another shift click here to select this part as well. And a few more things here. And perhaps one more here. And of course we could also eliminate some of these selections. Oh, look at that, we need to bring some back. There's a hole here. So let's do, unless we're in New Mexico and we're adding a hole in the rock to this scenery, we want to make sure that remains part of it. But you see this part here, this is kind of something you also can eliminate with shift click, going roughly along there. There are other ways to do that though. You could blur the selection, right? It doesn't matter what color it is, if it even has a color, but you can blur the selection here, Gaussian blur or box filter blur, which also has a show alpha mode, so you can see it very blurry or just a little bit. And then what that will tend to do is that it suddenly looks a little bit more like maybe there are some rocks or even some vegetation here. Although that looks unnatural, you wouldn't expect trees right here at the top of the mountain peaks. Still, it's something that, maybe it's an alpinist, right? A tourist waving at us. And either way, we can live with that. And let's go store this image. That also stores the alpha channel, our selection mask. And so now here is where we want to actually bring our sky into that, right? So there's a couple of things. We may want to get rid of this sun on the left, or we may want to bring it back there because it is, after all, roughly where the light is coming from. When we see the shadows here in this middle part, and then the brighter parts here. If we invert the selection, let me store it quick here, just in case we had made changes to it, and then invert and replace it. So now we see actually the lit part of the mountain range. It's clear that we do need a little bit of a sun in the picture here, maybe very close. This was only approximately added, so it doesn't matter exactly where it is, but somewhere up there in the far left, above the horizon, above the mountains, because we do see some parts here that are receiving that sunshine. So what we could do at this point is, again, reverse to the prior selection inverted status, or the original normal status, and add some clouds. Now there's a couple of cheap clouds we have here that could be in the render option. Rendering a sky, and it will render it just in that area, right? So now the initial direction or quality, angle, phase, and so on, you may need to experiment with that a little bit. I think there is a zoom factor that will help. There's probably some phase or scale, make it a little bit smaller. Iterations, more fine details, and then the cloud fall off. So you could have perhaps more cloudy condition or less cloud threshold, so you see more of that, and the cloud colors. All right, so that's a whole set of choices you have here for different appearance on that. There you go. That would be interesting here. Kind of a reddish tint for sunset. The sky base color should also be kind of a reddish, though. Let's get something like this going here, and then of course you might argue perhaps we need something yay different. The thing is, these are not super latest generation skies, and we only see a small portion of that anyway. So do we even need that? Maybe we need a gradient at least. Let's do that. Let's get a gradient sky here. Right click to get. Oh, we actually have them up here. There's some presets of gradients, and we could do. Let me scroll down here a little bit. Something. Ooh, something ominous like this here. If we do a gradient like this, that looks ominous. Something like that. All right. So. Okay, let's do that. Let's clear the whole selection. So we have this. Of course, we also need the sun back here, and a big red sun would be appropriate for this reddish light it gives us on the sky, the horizon line. So let's say we want to have, where do we have that? Where do we have that? Oh, it's one of the tools here. Under the gradients, we also have the Nova and Lightning. Darn it, I can't remember where it is. Nova, lens flares. Silly me, I'm looking at it. I'm staring at it. There it is. Okay, so lens flares. We could do something like this reddish one here and place it somewhere around. See how this this line here goes? If you track it back, it's somewhere up there that we want it. And there you go. Something like that. And there may be also a bluish one to add a little bit more, and something with some streaks like the green ones here. Right, if you look around, there may be some others you might like, the ones with those extra internal lens reflections. And there you go. Now that's perhaps something we need at the very end. We don't want to do that while we're still going to paint something on the front, in the front, right? Well, in fact, I'll do that all together. All this lens flares and reflections and the lights will take on later on. What we want to do now is to focus a little bit more on a wintry condition, even though the sun is reddish and the sky is lit up red. And we may want to add a reddish tint to the snow as well. This is not Sahara Desert sand color, although it could be as well. So what we do instead is perhaps subtract some colors or some blue colors, add a green or something like that. So we'll do a little bit darker, less green, less blue, for instance, and more red. Add that a little bit. So then it makes it look like this reddish sky is all over us, all around, and going to shine some red tint onto the entire scenery as well. Okay, so that's kind of normal. Let's go store that as the next major achievement. And what else do we need here? Oh yeah, snow. So we want to add snow, but in an animated fashion. So what I'll do is I'll create an animation from this. Let's see what are our dimensions here in the first place. Image info will tell us it's okay, 720p. Okay, so we'll go probably about 300 frames. Should be 10 seconds at 30 frames a second. Let's see if we can do that. 300. Yeah, easy peasy. Let's go 300 frames. And if we want to store that image, we can also store the animation. Let's do that here. Store animation to disk. We don't need to waste RAM for that. And then that way we can easily just restore it. Click here and that will restore this animation if we need to. All right, the alpha channel here we don't need to keep separate anymore. We do actually have a need for it, silly me. So let me go back to this, or rather to store the alpha here. Somewhere here we can say store as a brush image plus alpha. Where do we have the alpha? Replace alpha, there you go. So oh no, that's the whole thing. Where was the alpha? I thought we had a stored copy of alpha. Darn it, I may have lost it. Let's see, replace alpha, use image grayscale as alpha, paste in swap image. Where is it that I thought we had? Oh, lucky me, we still have it here. Okay, so let's go selection, store. Okay, all right, so we do have the stored alpha here, and I'm going to store this whole image as the current one here. So this one here should actually have the color as well, right? So we want to store this entire image. We know that that will store the image RGB plus the alpha channel, right? So in that sense, we don't need this one anymore. All right, so now let's go, and so all of these frames, color-wise, they're all the same. And we will want to add some snowstorm. Now, in the far distance, there's going to be mayhem, there's going to be a blizzard. And so that blizzard, let's go to the timeline. And for that one, we will go to the snowstorm. At the very bottom here, there's a snowfall. And so the thing we'll do is we'll have snowfall, very high quantity of snowflakes. And the velocity is the speed at which they are moving down. So when it's far away, we don't want them to appear going down so much vertically, but more sideways because the wind is carrying them sideways. The wind speed can be to the right or to the left. Will go reasonably fast, but not super fast, because the ones that are closer to us will have to appear moving faster yet. But right now, we will have mostly snowflakes going to the left fairly fast at almost no velocity going down, and just a tiny little bit, maybe 2 units here. Let's try that, 2. And no turbulence. It's going to be pretty much straight movement to the side. Size pretty small. Brightness not quite the brightest, because we want to reserve that for stuff that's really up close, right? So better contrast and perception of being really close. But we keep it like this. That should give us something. Let's give it a test here. Let's make sure we don't sudden jump or interpolate. We'll just do a straight linear and apply it. All right, so when we do that, it applies across the entire image sequence, the snowfall, and now we see the snowflakes here. We can play that, and so we can see what's happening. It's almost still too much vertical drop here, so I'm going to go and do an undo. Make sure you check this box before you render anything through that filter, so you can click undo and undo all these frames. And so now we'll go with even less velocities. This was 2. I think we can go down to 1. Yep, there it is. And the speed at which it moves, even a little bit less, a little bit slower, right? Or if we give it a little bit more, it will be even more horizontal. Less, there's only 1 unit down, and we'll have so much going sideways. Turbulence, barely any, perhaps just a little bit. The size we could make even smaller, right? 2. And the brightness, let's just keep it like kind of a grayish, almost close to halfway here. Let's go do that. So once we have that, we just need to repeat that again and again. Let's play it to see. Yeah, we can barely see it there. I don't know if the compressed video will capture that. So we'll need to re-render that a few times so that there is plenty, basically a wall of snowflakes going all along that same common direction. And that's for the stuff that's really far away. Now, if it's not going fast enough in terms of like populating all this, right, you see them a little bit here now. Maybe we need to change some of the parameters now. So one thing to do, make them a little bit brighter. Render again or apply again. Okay, so now we start seeing a little bit more. Let's make it even brighter. Not too much yet, because we want to keep some in some reserved really bright ones that are going to be big. But we do them at the last point. So right now we're focusing on stuff that's far away. Let's see, play that. Starting to get there. We might want to do a little bit more foggy appearance. This intense red and yellow is a little bit too saturated. So while we have the selection on here, we could do filter photographic. There's a light diffusion fog filter. We can do so we can go day for night. That's a little bit too much perhaps. Let's see if we do an interactive undo here. Yeah, that could be better. Or maybe, you know what, let's just leave it alone. We can see how this goes and maybe adjust it later on. So undo that. And let's just apply more of this snowstorm. Apply it a few more times. And then gradually we'll need to, so this was for very far away, right? And what we need to do now is gradually bring it also into the front ahead of the mountains. So this selection mask we currently have won't be suitable anymore. We need to change the wind speed a little bit. We need to make them go even faster to the left because the snowflakes we working on next are going to be the ones that are even closer. Velocity, they could come down a little bit more vertical. So instead of 1, we'll give them 2. And turbulence, not just yet, just a little bit, but eventually we'll have much more turbulence. The size, we can make them just 1 notch. Right now they were 2, let's make them 3. And brightness, we already did. Let's adjust that and render that. So now we should gradually see them so well. Okay, so the next step is to also allow them to render in front of the mountains. Not everything at the very front yet. Those will be mostly bigger, but the ones that are the far mountains there, those we definitely want to give some snowflakes in front now. So we could either drop that entire selection mask, but that will bring it also to the front. What we want is mostly the back end here. So we need to essentially add to that selection. And if we look at this, there's a mountain range we could add here. So let's do lasso. With the shift key, you can add to the current selection and do an approximate selection here. It doesn't have to be precise. It's not really rocket science. It's just art, right? And so we add this to the selection. We make sure we have the shift key select down as we select and add that. And why is it? Oh, I had that was the caps lock, not the shift key. Okay, let's go again. Or since we did actually the wrong selection before, let's undo, and now we can use the shift key instead of the other one. There you go. So now we have a selection, and we can also even blur it a little bit, so some of them will even appear in front of the rim here of these mountains in the front. So let's go blur that selection even more. Grow selection. Oh, that's another thing. We can grow it a little bit by a few pixels, and then we can also blur it some more. Box filter or blur, Gaussian blur. Let's do the box filter. That will be good. So we have now a zone where the next range, the next series of snowflakes will appear partly in front of these mountains as well. So let's go and render them. And then render them again. And so now it's accumulating still at the top in the sky as well, but on top of that also a little bit, or actually below, not on top, it will also render in front of these mountains. So in front of the mountains one more time. And let's go check that so far. Yeah, so now we have something that appears here in the front too. And a lot more in the back. Now we could really do thousands more back here. We should probably render that so many more times so that we have a complete blizzard accumulation in the back. But we do need to keep them smaller than this new size, right? If you keep doing that, that's fine. Let's go one more time. This time we'll bring the snowfall. We'll keep it at high level. We'll keep the velocity at the current, but the wind speed even a little bit faster, even more speed to the left. Turbulence up a little bit, size up a tiny little bit, and the brightness somewhat more up as well. All right, so we do one of those, and then we will switch to even more of the foreground. So right now, we see we have a mix. And see, the whole point about doing this in several stages, some of them small, some of them bigger and faster, is that it adds a bit of perception of three-dimensionality, the depth here, right? The ones that are going slow are farther, smaller away, and it will trick our eye or our brain to think that they are farther away. All right, but now in order to continue this, we need to further expand how deep that selection mask is. And what you could do instead of adding another selection like this, you could also just use that right click on the tool here with the selection fader. And what that means is you fade the current selection. So you go from about here and you fade it to that. And so it's making it fade away down here rather than suddenly go. Now you could also actually start with more. Let's get the selection, the lasso again here. Again, use the shift key to kind of get a very rough selection like this, and then do the, where is it? This mask here. Selection fader, and here we go. So I'm going to add a little bit more to that, and so that makes it more and more sort of soft selection fading here. You can also blur that one more. So again, it's not super precise here. It's just a very quick and dirty, not perfect, smooth, just a transition, right? Remember, this line is not where it suddenly stops being selected. This is the 50%. This is the halfway selected, halfway not selected. So there's a gradient here on the selection mask. And again, the purpose of that is to make sure that the next range of this is rendered, but not over everything, mostly in the far distance still, right? So we are going to render that. And wait, are we playing it or are we rendering it? Oh, we're playing it. That's not it. Okay, so let's go here and apply it. There you go. And there we go. So now we can see that we rendered some more in front of these mountains too, here on the left side and in the center here. But the more we look down, the less we see them. Now that's actually something you can also use to make it look like they're melting, right? These snowflakes, when they are reaching the temperature, the lower area may be warm enough that it's not actually snowing. You might see them disappear and, turn into raindrops. Now you may need to turn them into raindrop, but right now we're just seeing the snowflakes as such disappear. All right, so let's do one more, and that will be to clear the selection mask altogether. Now I wouldn't drop it altogether. I would say let's first store it, just in case you decide you want to get back to that. We now have this selection mask, and we have this one here to choose from. And you can always create others as well. But right now I'll simply clear that selection, and I'll do one more or two, maybe one or two more. So I'm going to reduce the number of snowflakes now, because we want to get the impression there's only a few of them nearby. And the velocity is going to increase a little bit. So they're going to be a little bit more heading downward. And the wind speed is going to increase quite a bit too. And the turbulence is going to increase. And the size is going to increase too. And the brightness is going to be almost, well, pretty much at max. Let's go. You can tell it's taking less time to render too, because it's going fewer of them. Right? So now I hope you can see how these bigger ones that are brighter and moving faster appear to be more up close, because they are faster in visual sense than the ones further back. If that was not faster enough, more fast enough, what you do is you undo that. Here, click undo. You get one level of undo. And if you think you're going to experiment here, be sure to, again, store this animation. Store animation to disk. And so you get another copy here. This one you might not need anymore, but I'll still hang on to it for a while. And let's say we wanted to actually reduce the amount of snowfall. The velocity was fine, the speed is fine. Let's give it even more. Give it the maximum on the sideways speed. And the turbulence, maybe we want a little bit more. The size of them and the brightness, that's already maxed. What we could do is perhaps reduce the number, the snowfall quantity, so that we really have to we still have control and we don't do too many of them at one point. You can see it's rendering nicely here now, so let's see what that looks like if we do play it. Yeah, it's definitely moving them faster, right? The snowflakes that are small and appear to be far or are supposed to look like they're farther away, they move slow compared to the big ones in the front. But the big ones are still a little bit too steady. I think I want to do one more time undo and then give it a lot of turbulence. Let's give it something like this. Size, perhaps actually less of them. So they really start to be the chosen few. Render that. There you go. All right, and then perhaps we'll do just one more where its snowfall is really just down to about a dozen or so of them, and the velocity is going to be further down too. But the wind speed we are already maxed out. The turbulence we could add some more, and the size, I don't know, maybe something like this, and go. Okay, so when we render that, yeah, that's when we will see only a very few big ones that are going sideways back fast. So look, if you want an even bigger difference between the fast moving up close ones versus the ones that are far away, you have to start with even slower speed for the initial small ones far away, right? And you can still do that a little bit. You can still go back to what we had initially, which was a large number of them with the selection mask that we had back there, or maybe this one here, right? Or something in between. Let's go replace and then perhaps add a little bit, whatever. We can work on that separately. But if we want, actually, I will use this one here, right? And then perhaps we should have kept the one in between. Let's just do that right now here. Let's add with Shift something like this here, so that it looks like it's adding. Oh, I missed a few. Let's get them there too. So we have that. We can blur it a little bit again with the box filter. I like that because we can see as a grayscale roughly how far that is. Something like that. All right, so this I'm not going to forget. I'm going to store that as well. So we have now the very highest level, the mid-range level, and the lowest level here. But the point is, this mid-range level now, we can go and say, make them back to really small, low turbulence. Wind speed, not so much. Keep them slower. Velocity, none at all. Well, it's at least 1. I wonder if we can change that to 0. Let's see if this crashes it. And then the size, really small. And I mean tiny, really, something like that. And the brightness, not so much. Let's go. And so now, of course, it's difficult to say if it's really adding something. But at the end of the render, if you keep an eye here in this upper area, let's zoom in a little bit, you should see a few extras the moment the animation rendering is done. Right, so I mean, right now, if you scrub through that, you see all this noise. But if you render another, at the end of it, you'll suddenly see 2 or 3 more. Boom. Did you see that? Let's do that one more time. There's a few more that will suddenly appear. Hard to say where. There they are. Right, this one here was added. So do that a few times until you're satisfied. You could do that a few dozen times until you have really a large amount of them. Don't make them too big just to cover the area faster. Keep just going with a few more of them. If you do want them darker, that would be appropriate if the skies are dark, right? You want them to be blending in, sticking out a little bit, but not too much. And then soon enough, you'll have a big wall of moving snowflakes here. Wind speed, we could even have some slower ones. And then back to even some faster ones. And so let's see what we have here. If I zoom. So I'm going to zoom out, actually make it 100%. There you go. Get rid of the selection mask. Deselect all this. And yeah, I'm not too happy with the colors. Maybe it's time to add something different here on the color. I'm going to close this. Let's do a quick look here. we certainly have that depth perception now with some of the big snowflakes up close going fast, and then some others in the far distance going slower. We could probably have done better with them going even slower at first, but we just took this quick shot. But I want to give it a bit more of a less warm appearance. So let's go back to that filter we had for adjusting the color. And this time, maybe adding and reducing the blue, reducing the red and the green, and adding some blue. That's not it. Let's try multiply. Get rid of the green, get rid of the red to some extent, and add some blue. Yeah, maybe a night vision type of snowstorm. Let's apply that across the entire frame sequence. And of course, we could also restore that selection mask, replace, and reduce or change the colors just there, right? Go and do some color map. Oh no, adjust the colors or the saturation or the hue. I mean, there's a variety of things to explore here. This is going to be more of a night scene now. Okay, let's try that. And perhaps the one thing that I should try really at this point, is clear that, is to add a bit of night vision with this filter here, the photographic filter. Before I do that, let me store a safe copy here to disk. And there we go. And so let's see, there's a couple of things we can do to experiment with a bit more of a foggy look here now. The fog filter, there you go. Maybe more of a bluish fog. And a little bit more opacity there. Animate that. Then there's also, where's it, day for night? Yeah, that will make it a little bit more like night conditions are here. And maybe this is not sunlight, maybe this is moonlight now, right? Or a distant star on a foreign planet. Let's go see what other filters do we usually have. Some soft contrast can be very interesting. That's too much of the soft contrast here, but you can adjust the exposure and the level of effect on that filter. And getting close. Let's see what else. Photographic light diffusion. Oh yeah, light diffusion. No, it's kind of getting snow blind that way. If you're looking at light diffusion, it's basically making the bright stuff shine into the dark areas, right? So that's definitely the kind of the snow blindness setting in here. Let's go and render that. That one does take a little bit longer to render, so it seems to be moving slowly. But once we're done, we can control the playback speed again. The playback rate. And we're done with that. And there we go. Alright, so maybe the last thing we need to do now is to add a little bit of sunshine or some star. Let's pretend we are at a different location in a different part of the universe. And we will have a blue star back here now. So what I'll do is first of all add a little bit of bluish tint again here under the colors. That's too much though. Let's only a tiny little bit, and let's make that the additive one. Yeah, that might be too much too. Yeah, you figure it out. Play with it a little bit. And then we have just one more time the timeline here to go with the lens flares. Very bottom, lens flares, last filter. And in the timeline, you can choose here the flare settings. I'm going to go with one of those faint stars like this one here. That preset will be nice. We'll put it down here somewhere so it does indeed still look like it's shining a little bit of light. This one here is pretty interesting too. Or is that too much with the lens flare? You know, that's pretty good. So we'll just put that one there. Right. And then that way we look like we are far from home. All right, let's see here. Play it. Okay, well, that's it for now. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Oh, and Merry Christmas.